Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the host and the founder of the Rise Above Justice Movement, the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. All right. So, tuning in from Georgia is a candidate that came highly recommended, but not just recommended as a demand to get onto this podcast by one of my friends, Noelle Heatherland, who is very active in the LGBTQ plus like organizing space in Georgia and is the statewide organizing person for Georgia Equality. But came recommended. This candidate is working towards a historic win. I think it's important to talk about, the who you are and why you're running. And as part of this candidate series, because candidates are running at all levels of government, they're running grassroots, purely grassroots. And this candidate is no stranger to that. So, Aaron Baker, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here. And I am running for Georgia State House in District 51, which is in Sandy Springs and Roswell, which are suburbs north of Atlanta. And a little bit about me, I am a software architect, my wife and I, we got married about 6 months ago. I have two kids, she has three kids, and so together with our parenting matrix of co-parents, we manage a lively and busy household. And I know normally don't have as much time as we have to go into my story, so you're getting a deep dive here. So,
Hey, you know what? I am so used to deep dive conversations, and our listeners also love the deep dive conversations because it brings that human approach. And these deep dive conversations are so exciting for me. I'm a talker myself,
okay,
but
all right,
with that being said, the floor is yours. Feel free to ramble as much as you
okay,
want.
okay. I'm gonna ramble.
Here
So,
we
so
go.
both of my parents are therapists. My dad is a psychiatrist, and my mom is a psychologist. I feel like I was trained from birth for politics to listen to people complain and not get paid enough for it. So my parents, they actually met at a sex therapy conference in the 70s, and they both worked at abortion clinics in the 70s. So I've basically been a liberal since birth. I was actually I was talking to my dad about this. Like I said, "Hey, Dad, can I mention the story of how you guys met? When I'm talking about my story." And he said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then he says, "But that wasn't actually a sex therapy conference, right?" And I was like, "Nope, nope, that's it. I don't need more details." um, I,
It's like some things are better left untold. And
yeah,
this is
yeah.
one
I
of
don't
those.
need I don't need the full story. I don't need all that. I don't need. So I haven't always been a girl. I used to be a boy, and I figured that out during the pandemic because that was a really good time to think and figure things out. Plenty of time to reconsider your priorities, and you didn't have to care about what anyone else thought. Um, and so by the end of the pandemic, I realized that I needed a transition, and when the lockdown was over, that was really when the state of Georgia started to pass laws against trans kids. So that's really how I got my start in politics and in legislation. Was I was down at the Georgia State Capitol when SB 140 was passed, which is a bill that bans kids from receiving doctor prescribed medical care, the same medical care that I knew had changed and saved my life. And this law has been devastating. I have friends, families that have moved out of the state so that their kids can get medical care. I have friends that fly their child to another state so they can get medical care, and these are the lucky ones. Because I know plenty of kids who are um, just out of luck because of this. Um, so this just a devastating law, but in the moment when that law was passed, that's when I knew that I needed to do more. So I am, but I am trying to be the kind of candidate that I would want to vote for. So I think that in too many elections, we've had to vote for candidates that I wasn't like super excited about. Um, and I want to be a candidate that people can be really excited about. So one of the things I'm doing is that I'm not taking any corporate money. Not taking any money from PACs because I want to make sure that we are working on building a Georgia that represents the people of Georgia. And that's why I have a progressive platform that's about working people because we need to make sure that all of our families have access to safe and affordable housing. I got a lot of kids in school, so I want to make sure that our schools are fully funded and our teachers are being paid fairly, but also we need to make sure that all of our Georgia workers are being paid fairly. So that's kind of what I'm doing and how I got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing like the backstory because this is often something that is left out of a conversation as to why somebody is running. And you're running because you see a need. You see the current leadership or alleged leadership is not meeting the moment of what, the constituents of this district need. Now,
Right.
how far from like Atlanta is your district? I don't know Georgia. I'll be completely honest. But what is like that area kind of like look like and
So
what
if it's no traffic, you can get from my district to downtown Atlanta in 30 minutes.
oh
But the
wow.
key word being no traffic.
You mean like people that like to sit in traffic? And I'll tell you this, going from where I live to my mom's, it can take about 15 minutes. Depending, like you said, depending on traffic, it can take about 40 minutes, close to an hour. Literally 15 minutes away, less than 10 miles, but it can take an hour to get from here to there because people, mm, Kansans, I'm going to be the first to say it, Kansans do not know how to drive. Um,
Okay.
we sometimes do 80 and a 65, and you have to do that, or they're going to run right into the back of you because they think that you're just sitting still, which
Wow.
causes a lot of other issues, which causes a lot of wrecks. Oh yeah,
I don't know that we,
it's
I feel
insane.
like Georgia doesn't necessarily have that problem because in Georgia, the Georgia State Patrol is pretty serious.
Mhm.
You don't need to mess with them. So
Very intimidating.
yeah.
But you're working towards a historic win, as I mentioned at the beginning. But what has been your experience so far with running for office? What are you hearing some of the concerns from your constituents? Like you've been out canvassing. Have you done any phone banking?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
What are some of those concerns that, constituents in your district are bringing forward and talking about? And
sure.
I know there's a lot.
Yeah.
Your opponent, which we'll get into here in just a moment. But what are some of the concerns that you're hearing from the constituents? What's working and what's not working?
So the number one thing I hear when knocking on doors, like I ask people what issues are most important to you. Most of the time, they just say everything. Because it does feel like so much is going wrong in the world. It does feel like that we are being attacked on all fronts, that the walls are closing in. So they often don't even know where to start. But when people do know where to start, they are starting with affordability, of course. They're talking about the price of housing, that they want cheaper and affordable housing. They want to make sure they want cheaper gas prices. They want groceries to be cheaper. And they especially want their electric bill to be cheaper. That's been a really big deal. I think so much of the pushback we see from these AI data centers is because we're pushing all of the cost, the not just the cost of electricity back onto the consumers, the cost of the environment back on people. Like they're not being held responsible for any of the impact they're having on people's lives or their environment. And so we're seeing pushback there. And so what I want to see and so what they people really want to see more of is a government that's actually paying attention and working for them instead of working for corporations. Like that's what I've been seeing a lot of in the district. I I found that my platform is really resonating people. People are really excited about a platform that's working for working people. And they're really excited about a candidate who doesn't take money from corporations. They really love the idea of getting money out of politics. They're skeptical. They don't think it can happen, but they love the idea of working towards it.
Speaking of which, how do we work towards that? So whenever we think of these corporate dollars, I think of AI data centers, literally raising the cost of literally everything in these communities because it hits communities very disproportionately. And they're not putting these in like downtown Kansas City. They're putting these in areas that where a lot of marginalized communities live, Black and brown, queer and trans, these marginalized communities that are obviously already hit by very heavy cost burdens as it is, because the cost of living continues to increase, wages stay the exact same, and it's not meeting that level of where people can thrive. And this isn't just specific to Georgia, it's specific to literally everywhere. But speaking of getting money out of politics, what have you oh God, this is gonna be a rambling. I can feel this. But what does sorry, I'm excited to hear this because we just did like the pre, quote unquote pre-interview and kind of learning about your opponent in this race. There's a lot that has happened with that specifically. But what does getting money out of politics look like? Your opponent has a lot of corporations, has a lot of PAC money that's being funneled into her campaign. But what does it look like to get money out of politics, and how do we get there?
So one of the things I work on is I build tools to help people become engaged in Georgia politics. So one of the tools I built is called Georgia Fast Money. And what the site does is it takes data from the Georgia State Ethics Commission, um, which does technically release, these ethics filings for all the candidates where you can see how they raise their money. But the website is terrible, and you can't actually deep link. You can't link to a candidate's finances. The site doesn't work that way. You have to go to the site, you have to find the search page, and then you have to search for the candidate, and then you can pull up their finances. But it's not designed to be accessible in any way.
And it's
Um,
intentional.
I think you're right. It almost feels malicious. But what I did is on Georgia Fast Track, it takes all that data and then it organizes it by party. So you can see how the parties raise their money, and it organizes it by industry. So you can see how different industries are influencing different politicians. And the amazing thing about this, which maybe it's not amazing, maybe it's no surprise at all, but here in Georgia, Republicans are raising twice as much money as Democrats. Um, but Democrats have 5 times as many donors. So Democrats are raising a lot more grassroots money, whereas Republicans are getting a lot more corporate money, a lot more big donations. And what makes the site really great is that it puts this data out in the open that wasn't necessarily available previously. And I believe that if we can get this information in front of people and show people these are the industries impacting our politics, then we can start to make a change. So one of the reasons I don't take money from corporations, and I really believe that if we can keep getting this information out there about how much corporations are influencing our politics, that we can actually pressure other politicians to do the same. So that's kind of the vision I have, is that it starts with politicians. One, I think this is a winning platform. I think people are going to vote for me for trying to get money out of politics and for not accepting these donations. I think that's going to prove to work in my campaign, and other candidates are going to see that and see, oh, that works. I'm going to do that too. And then I think when you combine that with making this data more accessible and trying to find ways of pulling the people into the process, I think we can actually get to a place where we are succeeding in reducing the amount of influence money has on politics, with the end goal of making it official. Like, we do need to abolish Citizens United. We need to take concrete steps to make sure this never happens again. But before we can do that, it's going to take a grassroots movement from the bottom to making sure that we are building a government from the bottom up that represents people. And once it does represent people, we need to make sure it stays that way forever.
100%. And God, that's a mic drop moment. It really is. Because I've said on this podcast numerous times, and I'm going to say it again. If you are older than 2010, which I am by many years, you are
Yeah.
older than Citizens United versus FEC. That Supreme Court ruling, the disastrous, where it literally said that money is free speech. Money is not free speech. It literally is not. And it has destroyed the foundation of politics. And we see that nationally. We see a lot of APAC influence. We see a lot of, oh God, there's so much. And it trickles down to those local elections. It trickles down. And we see that. Um, Again, your opponent is no stranger to that at all. And she's very active on Twitter. Um,
Yes.
there was one tweet that came, and it is from a person allegedly named Will Davis, or at aslan895777240. He is a good reminder that there used to be somewhat normal Democrats before they all became insane leftist woke gender bending communists. Holy shit. There's a lot to unpack here. And then
There
your
is.
opponent, and this tweet is from 327 of 2024. And your opponent replied and said, "Not all of us."
Right.
Um, all right.
Which I
All
mean,
right.
I guess you could put me in the category of gender bending. Um, I will happily accept the woke label. And of course, I believe in universal health care, so definitely a socialist. So yes, I think she's completely she's denouncing people like me in that tweet. Um, but I think there isn't. I think it's really easy to differentiate me from my opponent in this race.
Mhm.
There are a lot of ways to do that. One way to do that is to just look at her Twitter and see the things that she's posted, which are often really inflammatory and really inappropriate for a state representative to make. Um, Another way you can do that is by just one thing our campaign did is we cataloged all of her tweets and indexed her most common keywords and discovered that she was talking about things outside of her district on national politics way more than she's talking about local issues. She actually barely mentions her district at all. So she's talking about like the cities in her district, like Johns Creek and Roswell and Sandy Springs, 17 times. But she's talked about Israel over 1,000 times, and she's talked about Zoran Mamdani over 300 times, but she barely mentions her district at all. And then, of
And
course, sorry, go ahead.
scrolling through this website, that you and a collective group of people of over 20 people created and combined all of this data, created and combined everything. Scrolling to the very bottom, like you said, DHS mentioned 0 times. Renee Good mentioned 0 times. Transgender mentioned once. Alex Preddy mentioned once, and I'm assuming it was thoughts and prayers, because
Oof.
that's the response every
There's
single time
actually she has
that.
a tweet where she was praising the actions of Trump official Tom Homan, who had just
Oof.
that one's really Tom Homan had just
Mhm.
tried to excuse the death of Renee Good,
Mhm.
and she posted a tweet praising his remarks, and I was like, what?
Then you go in and you look at affordable, mentioned twice. District 51, 3 times. You just mentioned this. And then, like you said, you kind of scroll up and you see Netanyahu kind of popping in, 29 times, leftist 31, progressive 36. Kemp, which I know that she wanted Kemp for US Senate. I saw that, or something around that.
Yeah, yeah,
DSA
the
is
New York.
mentioned 78 times. Muslim is mentioned 101 times. So it's clear, like you said, she's out of touch with what's happening in District 51, but more focused on these national, which, yes, national does trickle down, but you're not representing nationally. You're
Right, right,
representing the
right. It would be
District
really
51.
appropriate if she was a, a congresswoman. That would be like
Yeah,
that would
absolutely.
be the
100%. Yes.
but this is but that the state of Georgia, we don't have that much impact on foreign policy. I mean, we can have some, but it's really not our purview.
This is insane. But let's dive in and talk more about you because you are
Yes, please.
the focus of this. So in Georgia, there was a lot of bills that were defeated this legislative session. A lot of them were anti-LGBTQ bills. Can you kind of talk about that collective action of all the groups and all the organizers and advocates and people that would be directly impacted by these bills if they were to pass? Can you talk a little bit about what that organizing effort looked like to defeat over, I believe it was 30 plus like anti-LGBTQ bills in the Georgia legislature?
Sure. So it was a huge collective effort with multiple Georgia groups working together to make that happen. Like we have a lot of great progressive groups in Georgia fighting for LGBTQ rights. We had Georgia Equality down there, Human Rights Campaign, SNAPCO. There are more than I can list here because there's a lot of them, and I feel bad for anyone I left out. But it was a really all of these Georgia progressive groups joining together at the Capitol. We had a great day at the Capitol called Pride at the Capitol, where all these groups showed up together on the same day to really make sure that we were fighting for LGBTQ rights. And I am truly honored to be a part of it. Um, One thing that I am especially proud of is that I built a tool called Georgia Fast Track. And Georgia Fast Track is a legislation tracker that organizes Georgia legislation by who it impacts, and then it breaks it down in plain English. And this tool is used by legislators, lobbyists, and aides all over the Capitol. But it is also used by people all over Georgia because the site will look up your reps, it'll give you their phone number, give you a script for what to say. And during the last legislative session, it was used to make over 400 calls to representatives. So I am proud to have had a small part in trying to keep that legislation from passing.
And these bills, if they were to be enacted, would be deeply devastating to the trans and LGBTQ plus community as a whole. And but more importantly, the attack that we see on trans youth and trans kids. And they continue to ban books
That one was really horrible. The SB
like
74, where they were trying to criminalize librarians
mhm,
for sharing books, what they called, for sharing books with sexual content to students, and but then they defined sexual content as being as homosexuality. Like they wanted to make a situation where it'd be criminal for my children to read books about their own family. Like that's completely insane. Um,
but yet these are also the same people that say we need to protect children, but do absolutely nothing about violence in schools. We saw it with Uvalde, where they stood outside for 77 minutes.
and so
Okay.
little for child
Like,
welfare. Like where they don't care about our education. They don't care about feeding our students. They don't care that our students are don't have secure housing. There are so many ways we can be supporting young people, and they're choosing not to.
exactly. And okay. I know we were just talking about like national politics, and but DHS and ICE. So I know this isn't just national, and it's looked different in a lot of areas. I know here in Kansas City, we see them very like, Kansas City has like close to 1 million people that live in it. And like you also kind of like add in like the Kansas City metro area on both sides of the state line because there's Kansas City, Kansas, and then there's Kansas City, Missouri. I live on the Kansas City, Kansas side, but I grew up on the Missouri side, if that makes sense. If you look at the map, you kind of like see it. Like if you look at the country, you just kind of like see Missouri and Kansas right next to each other. There's a line that goes right through it. Literally, you can walk across a state line. One side of one street you're in Missouri, the other side of the street you're in Kansas. That's how close it is, and just driving it's even faster. But what has ICE and like DHS and like Border Patrol, HSI, all of these look like in your district and across Georgia?
I mean, of course, we're seeing ICE here too, and it's really devastating to see the impact it's had on communities because no, obviously, no family should be afraid of driving to work, should be afraid of driving their kids to school. And yet I'm hearing these horror stories in Roswell about people who are afraid to leave their house. And that's not, we can't be creating a world where people live in fear of being a part of the community. That doesn't make us safer. If people are afraid of talking with law enforcement, that actually makes us less safe. Like that's actually the opposite of how we want our communities to work. We need to be building our communities around trust instead of fear. And so,
And speaking of trust, speaking of trust, people have lost trust and they have lost faith in government. And you talk about this on your website too. But why do you think that is? And a lot of that, leads into the influence of the money in politics. That's obviously a really big, significant part here. But overall, why do you feel, from your opinion, do you think people have lost trust and lost faith in the political process and in candidates and elected officials? What do we
yeah,
have going on from your perspective?
I think a lot of people feel that really neither party has been representing people. And I think both parties have tried to make themselves out to be like the party that represents working people to with different approaches and different levels of success. But fundamentally, it feels too much like both parties are not representing people, they're representing money. Like that seems to be the fundamental bias of politics is that is that profits and stock prices are somehow more important than our livelihood and well-being.
What are some of the other concerns that you are hearing? We touched on affordability, we touched on like a number of other things, but what
So
else are people
I'm
talking
hearing a lot
about in
of
your district?
people I'm hearing a lot of people talk about transit. So in my district or in Atlanta and the suburbs of Atlanta, our 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 rapid transit network, MARTA, just announced that they are implementing their next gen bus network. What this is a major replan of all of the bus routes in Atlanta. So some of them have been taken away, actually, and some have been added. In fact, more have been taken away than have been added. Um, and one place they've been taken away in particular is in my district in North Fulton, where there's a major road that goes right through the district, Holcomb Bridge. And there's this 3 mile stretch that had a bus route on it that doesn't anymore because of cutbacks. And so I've talked to people in the district who literally don't know how they're getting to work because the MARTA website has this tool that'll recommend the new bus route for wherever you live, and the tool recommends a 1 hour walk if you live on Holcomb Bridge, so that you can catch the bus. And that's not real. That's not reasonable for anyone who lives there. And the reason this is happening is because Georgia has some of the lowest transit funding in the country. Our transit is funded by our cities and our counties and at a national level, but the state of Georgia does not like funding MARTA, and that's something we really need to fix. And we also need to reconsider what we want MARTA to be. Like too much of our transit network feels like it was built not to connect people, but for the exact opposite, to actually separate people and keep people separate. Um, and that's and so what you find is that a lot of our MARTA stations, our train stations, don't actually go anywhere. A lot of the MARTA stations are just parking lots of where you can drive to get on MARTA, and they're not actually destinations of places you'd want to go. They were never developed with that intention of being integrated into a community or building a community around them. So there just needs to be sort of this major rethinking of what we want rapid transit to be in Georgia, like because it's not. we haven't gone in the right direction. And because of that, because we haven't actually had a good, strong vision of what rapid transit should be, we invest way too much in cars. And you can see the end results of that. I was just driving right outside my house. I was just driving 2 miles down the street, and during peak traffic, it took, uh, 30 minutes to go 2 miles. And as I'm stuck in traffic and looking at like sort of all the parking lots around me and the just sort of the endless asphalt in front of me, I can't help but think about how we've designed this world just for cars and for oil. And because, like the streets and the asphalt, that's asphalt's just a byproduct of oil, and then the cars' engines need oil to run, and then we have the gasoline that powers the cars, and all of this we've built is about oil. But really what this does is it creates these walls that separate us. Like these roads are just effectively moats that disconnect us from the communities around us. Like we can't walk anymore. We can't talk to our neighbors because we're just surrounded by moats all the time. And so I would just love to see a world where people are connected to each other instead of instead of a world that we have just centered around oil. That would be really great.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of money in politics, fossil fuel industry funnels a lot of money, like you were talking, funnels a lot of those money, wow, funnels a lot of money into elections. And it impacts a lot, and people don't think about it. Speaking of which, I want to pivot here for a second because there was a story that literally shattered my heart that came out of Georgia. And I'm going to read off your platform directly. We must guarantee bodily autonomy. Every Georgian deserves the right to make private medical decisions free from political interference. Currently, state law bans most abortions after 6 weeks, long before many people know they are pregnant, and limits access to gender affirming care. These restrictions disproportionately impact women, LGBTQ individuals, and rural or low income residents. Georgia has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, particularly among Black women, and insufficient access to reproductive and gender affirming healthcare leaves residents vulnerable. Protecting bodily autonomy is essential for personal dignity, health, and economic stability. I think about this every single day. As
Yeah.
we learned about the case of Adriana Smith, this story destroyed every last ounce of emotion that I had. This was one of the most horrific and one of the most devastating stories that I've heard. But Adriana is one of millions. Maybe I'm over exaggerating here, but it feels like millions. But it's definitely in the thousands. It's definitely in the hundreds of thousands because Black maternal health is so often overlooked. So I want to, I've talked about Adriana Smith on this podcast before, but coming from your perspective, whenever you learned of this story, because this broke like literally international headlines. Georgia makes headlines. Georgia is no stranger to headlines. But whenever you first heard about this story of Adriana Smith, what was your reaction? And what did you hear like around? Because you've been in organizing spaces. What did you hear? Like the conversation that comes from this, and what was your reaction whenever you first learned about this? Because she was declared brain dead in 2025, in February 2025. Um, but the fetal cardiac activity was detected, and under the extreme abortion ban in the state of Georgia, it prohibited the family from making these decisions, right? And it's
Yeah.
so, oh God, this story destroys me. It really does. I
I
can't get
mean,
it out
it
of my head.
was, yeah, it was one of those stories where the more you learned about it, the more like you were just horrified. Like that's it. We shouldn't have our medical system like it's already backwards that we can't even get healthcare for just, that healthcare is completely inaccessible, whether that's because, we have these rural neighborhoods that don't have any doctors, or we have healthcare that's completely too expensive and inaccessible, and insurance that's too expensive and inaccessible. Like all of it is backwards. But then we are also legislating the care that people are allowed to get, and it doesn't make sense. We need to have, we need to get our doctor, we need to get politicians out of doctors' offices and making sure that we are actually getting people to believe in science again, which I think there's been, I think the end result of this has just been devastating. Like you said, Georgia's maternal mortality is very high, much higher than the national average. And there's so much more we could be doing there. Like we need to be restoring full reproductive rights. We need to making sure that everyone has access to gender affirming care. And we need to be doing so much more.
Like I said, this story is one of many. And I think of another case here in Kansas. Um, she was a former Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader, and she became septic while giving birth to her child and ultimately passed away. I think about this one, not only because it's like really close to like where I live at, right? But also it's one of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, across the country that are either currently facing this, have faced it, or the mm. My co-founder is
Oh,
very active in like Tennessee, and she collaborates with a lot of like elected officials in Tennessee, and she stood outside of the Tennessee state capitol with a giant inflatable IUD. I love it. And in 2023, she wrote a song called Barefoot and Pregnant that went viral.
oh.
And it was so good. She uses her rage, and I can't talk about Gwen Levy enough. Gwen Levy of Gwen Levy and the Breakdown. You can find her on streaming platforms on YouTube, and you can also hear her on our podcast. Shameless plug there a little bit, but she talks a lot about abortion access and reproductive rights because we know that reproductive rights is healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. We know that. We know that. But thank you for
Yeah,
talking about Adriana. Thank you for letting me kind of like ramble about this because
that's fine.
this is deeply important to me. My and also to like
Yeah,
survivors of sexual assault, survivors of rape, survivors of domestic violence. They need to have access to healthcare. We should not have a thing
right.
in the United States as a rape kit backlog. There should be no such thing. There should be literally no such thing. It's common sense, but it's obvious that
Yeah.
some individuals and some elected officials obviously lack that.
I think a lot about how we got here. Like, how did we
Mhm,
get into a world where we
mhm.
don't treat doctors as authority figures, where we don't treat them with respect, or that we don't treat science with respect, or like how did we get to a place of just so much mistrust for science and medicine and technology? And I think it's because we constantly see these things not serving the people. Like it's like we these things are always, used to charge us more money to grow corporate profits, and we never really and seeing how they improve people's and we do see how they improve people's lives, but at the same time we're also seeing how we're being charged more and more all the time. It feels like the technology has this, and medicine and science has this potential to serve people, but we aren't actually taking advantage of it. Instead, we're just using it to grow corporate profits, to grow the stock market, and we're not actually um, trying to figure out the best way to make things work for people. And the end result of that is that people don't trust any of these systems and institutions anymore, which is causing all sorts of havoc. Like it's
Mhm. What are some of the groups that you are a part of in Georgia? I know I see a lot of pictures of DSA, which I'm
yeah,
a member of the Kansas City DSA myself. I consider
nice.
myself to be a democratic socialist because I believe in the working class and I believe a better tomorrow is obviously possible. But what are some of those groups that you organize with, that you are a part of? You have some good endorsements,
I
including like
do.
state and like you say, like dozens of local organizations and leaders are standing together. And your website, Aaron, 4GA, the number 4.com, lays out your entire platform. It lays out what you care about. It lays out everything about you. This website is very well designed, if I do say so myself. It's very well put together. And I also love that you have a press kit on here too, because it helps me become prepared and ask you these questions. But it's just, what are some of those groups that you are a part of? Let's give some shout outs to these organizations in Georgia that are doing some badass work and also badass human beings that are working alongside you to get you elected. What
Sure.
are some of those groups? Let's give them shout outs.
Yeah, so of course, I'm excited to receive endorsements from Working Families Party, Georgia Conservation Voters, the LGBTQ Victory Fund. Really excited to have endorsements from legislators in the state capitol. We have Gabriel Sanchez and Eric Bell and Abreu Roman, and which I
Yes.
just want to mention that's actually kind of unusual. Um, for someone who's running against a Democratic incumbent to have endorsements from sitting legislators in a primary, um, it's actually a very, very unusual thing that doesn't happen very often. So I want people to understand how special that is.
Mhm. And you know what that means?
I do
You
know
know,
what that means, but please.
that means that people are seeing a need. They're needing change. They want to see representation that represents people and not money. I love the websites that you have created. Like you mentioned, like the Georgia Fast Track and the Georgia Fast Money. It gives a snapshot into what's actually happening. It shows that people are ready for change. You know, I do not feel the current leadership nationally, with the DNC leadership, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, is meeting the moment of the people. It's obvious that your incumbent is not meeting the needs of the people. Whatever you announced your campaign, I read your press release and I want to highlight something. So, a Jewish parent, digital organizer, and government transparency advocate has announced her candidacy for Georgia State House District 51, running to represent, here's the key word, and this needs to be bolded, to represent Sandy Springs and Roswell. As a long term Sandy Spring resident, Aaron has worked to make Georgia politics more accessible. I said that really weird. More accessible by designing powerful tools that simply complex or sim- I need to learn how to read, Aaron. I'm sorry. Simplify complex legislation and expose the influence of money in politics. Now she is running as a Jewish, openly trans, democratic socialist candidate
That's
to
right.
actively redefine what it means to be a sitting state legislator in Georgia. If you were elected, you would become the first openly trans legislator in the Deep South. You know, I have the utmost respect for you, not only because I've heard from Noel Heatherland, which we mentioned earlier, but just looking at your platform, looking at your social media, the way that you engage your future constituents, it shines a light on a wall. It gives people that hope. It gives people that joy that they see people that look like them, that believe like them, and will fight for them. It is literally common sense. Politics does not need to be this hard. It needs to be transparent. It needs to have integrity. It needs to have accountability. Are you going to be the best elected official? I don't know because there's going to be times that you will make mistakes. I want to say
I think I'm
yes.
going to be really good at it,
I think so
actually.
too. I
Like,
do. I do.
actually,
I want to be. I want to be clear. I absolutely do too. But even then, sometimes those of us that are, quote unquote far left, that are democratic socialists, we still make mistakes. But the key thing is we believe in integrity, and we also believe in accountability. So if we make those mistakes, we welcome that feedback, and we're not going to challenge that feedback. We're going to take it and do something even better. That is what we need to bring into politics, not only federally, but also in the states, and even down to your local water board. Okay,
Right.
I didn't think that the water board was like actually like a really important thing until I moved into an area that they tried to privatize public utilities, which is literally insane to me. And it's a right wing talking point that we need to privatize these so they can go in and do some more corrupt bullshit. And that's literally what happens. I didn't realize how important it was to get progressive voices elected at every single level until I actually moved into an area that matters. And God, we can sit here and we can talk for
Right.
so long about the issues that go wrong in politics, but there, I'm speechless because it is an honor to sit down and talk to you on this podcast. But it's also, yes, I'm fangirling. I'm kind of hyping you up, and I'm just excited because it gives me that hope. And like I said, it brings back that joy to politics. And what are you hearing as far as like feedback after you announce your campaign? What are you hearing, like your friends, your family, your wife, your children? What are you hearing as far as like the feedback? Like after you talk to somebody, you explain, your platform, what do you hear in return? Because you're asking
Sure.
them, you know, what are some of your top concerns? But what is that feedback that you were receiving on social media, which obviously is a mixed bag? The MAGA grandmas on Facebook are terrible, but but just thinking, about some of that feedback, what are you hearing as far as like feedback with your campaign and like you? What is
Okay.
what are you hearing?
Sure. So, as you can expect on the internet, a lot of people have really interesting things to say about someone like me running for office. Um, but yeah, there are some days when I get literally hundreds of hateful comments a day.
Mhm.
But what I've found is that doesn't actually represent my real life in any way. Like in real life, I'm, treated with kindness and respect everywhere I go. That's not real. That's just the internet. It's just pretend. Because when I'm knocking on people's doors, people are really receptive. They're excited to have a candidate at their door, and they're excited about this message. They're excited about platforms that fight for working people, and they're excited to hear that I don't take money and from corporations. And so the people I talk to are very supportive. We have very supportive, really excited and supportive volunteers, and we have a lot of people who are excited about the potential of this campaign because this campaign means a lot of different things to different people. But we've built a really, really impressive coalition. And my family also has thoughts on this. My wife has been incredibly supportive, and I have no idea how I could do this without her. And my kids have been supportive too, but they do complain sometimes. And but they know I'm trying. Like I joke that like the secret to running for office and having a career and raising children, the secret of doing that is just to do all of those things poorly. That's the trick. Um,
Mhm.
but in reality, I am doing a pretty good job of spinning all the plates. I'm doing okay at work. Forget my kids' lunches sometimes, and my daughter was lamenting that she didn't get enough time with me this weekend. Um, but fundamentally, when I talk to people, everyone in my life is excited for this. My kids were so excited about the Esther website.
So you want to talk about that for a second, really quickly? Because we
Sure.
referenced it earlier, and this will be the last thing that I'll ask you. Well, there's actually one more thing, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But you created this website about your current incumbent, and I was reading off of it just a little bit ago, and whenever before we started recording, you were like, "Hey, go to this website. Like, if you want to know everything about my incumbents, this is where you go to look at it." But do you want to talk about that just for a second
Sure,
and mention like what the website is too?
sure. So one of the things that we always thought from the beginning of this campaign, which is that if we just told people the things that my opponent has said and done, then we would win. Like that's all it would take. We just had to let people know her record, and that would be it. So that's what we did here. We're not trying to misrepresent any facts here. We are using, utilizing, newspaper headlines. We're utilizing her exact own words to describe this candidate. And so the website we built is estherpanich.com. My opponent did not register the domain name of her name, so we did. Um, and the website we built was really the result of some incredible work by my team. We have over 20 enthusiastic enthusiastic people who were actually eager to compile research for this project. And when you go to the site, it should be pretty clear why they were so eager to work on it, because there is a lot of information about my opponent out there. Um, and and so, but after you view all this information, it becomes abundantly clear that my opponent should not be running as a Democrat, um, because they're talking like a Republican, they're acting like a Republican, they're taking money from Republican donors, and they are supporting Republican candidates for office. So just recently, and I was shocked that she did this after I announced my campaign, that she would just hand us opposition research like this. But after I announced, a month after, she decided to endorse a Republican for the mayor of Sandy Springs, which is baffling to me. that, um, but here we are. So what we've done is we've taken all these examples of how she does not represent the Democratic Party and compiled them together in one place. And I am just incredibly proud of the work that my team has done on this. And I hope people look at the site and really take the time to decide who is going to be the best person to represent them in District 51.
That person is you.
Okay, good.
That
Thanks.
person is you. I feel that with everything that I've heard about you, everything that I've researched, looking through your social media, you are a badass human being. But also, and yet, you know what? This episode is going to be the hype episode because I cannot tell you enough, like how much I've heard. But I want to say thank you first of all for being transparent, for representing the people, for being bringing your entire self to everything that you do, no matter what this outcome is. I know that this is not it for you. I know there's a lot more to come. I know that I want to see you in Congress. I'm gonna tell you this now. I want to see you in Congress. I think you'd be such a good
A long
Congress
way away.
person,
Just so you know,
but
I don't want to move to DC or anything. I got kids in school.
I don't blame you.
But okay.
I don't blame you. Just make this like one of your future aspirations. I think Congress would do so well for you. But Georgia is home. Georgia is a state that is worth
There's so
fighting
much
for.
work to do here first. It's not time to leave. I mean,
Yes.
like, there's been a Republican trifecta in Georgia for t over 20 years. They have done so much damage. They did the 6-week abortion ban you mentioned. They banned gay marriage. My marriage wouldn't be legal here. The minimum wage is still 5.25 here. They've attacked our voting rights. There's so many things we need to fix, so many ways we need to make Georgia work for people. And so right now I'm very much focused in Georgia, and it's going to take a while before we fix this.
It just sounds nice, you know? But I agree. And Kansas also has a trifecta. And my home state of Missouri also has a trifecta, and it's all controlled. And it is so it's not representative of the people.
Yeah.
Kansas is
So,
actually more of like a purple state than a red state.
so here in Georgia, we have a record number of Democrats running.
Mhm.
And part of that is people like me. There's so much discontent in the Democratic Party right now. People are upset with the party and they're upset with incumbents. So there's a lot of people like me who are running against incumbents, but we also have a record number of Democrats running against Republican incumbents who don't normally have opponents. So there is a lot of potential. Like there's potential this year for us to actually take back the Georgia State House and break the trifecta for the first time in 20 years. Like that could happen this year in Georgia. Maybe, maybe not, but it could happen. If it does happen, we need to make sure that we have strong Democrats in office, which is why this primary is so important, because we need to make sure that we have real progressives in there when that does happen. But what I'm really curious about is what have you seen in Kansas?
Ooh, there's a lot here. Okay. So most recently, Kansas broke headlines, and not for a good reason. It was to attack trans people and their driver's licenses.
Oh yeah, that.
Kansas became the what was that?
Yeah, that.
Kansas became the very first state to bar trans people from essentially keeping their driver's licenses that align with their identity. As I've mentioned, my partner is trans. Luckily, her gender marker and her driver's license was changed in the state of Missouri. The state of Missouri failed this bill this year, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen like next year or the year after or any time between now and God knows when. Um, but Kansas became the first state to bar trans people from having their true like who they are on their driver's licenses, and they essentially sent out these letters, and you had to what's the word I'm thinking of, essentially you risked your license being suspended, or you had to essentially like forfeit it, right? And you had to
Yeah.
go exchange it. And then they, put your, if you are a trans man, they put female. If you're a trans woman, they put male. Like you're assigned at birth. They reverted all that back. It also does attack birth certificates. We haven't seen a whole lot of movement necessarily on the birth certificate part just yet, as of like maybe like a week or two. Whenever I looked at it, um, again, my partner is not impacted by it necessarily, but she was born in the state of Kansas, and if the birth certificates do revert back, hers will also revert back, even though it was changed in Missouri, because your birth certificate gets approved by the state in which you were born in, and whenever you change it or you amend it or anything like that, it does revert, but essentially it will revert back to her dead name, which I cannot even express like how I feel about that,
That's
knowing
horrifying.
knowing where she was, and she'll share her story on this podcast at some point. She isn't to that point just yet. I told you about it like offline, and it's a devastating story, and it really hits me hard. But it's also given me a whole nother fight. But I do have hope because we do have a governor candidate that is running. And something that people may not understand is Kansas again is a very purple state. It's more like libertarian more than it is GOP. There are very open-minded people. The government just does not represent those people. But it's not because of the Kansas City area. It's a lot of the other like rural districts that make up like the state legislature. We've come really close to breaking the supermajority of the GOP, just like in Missouri also. But we have a really good governor candidate that is a major badass. Her name is Cindy Holscher. She's a current state senator and has been for many years. And she is a badass human being that fights for bodily autonomy, that fights for LGBTQ people. She was one of the first senators that spoke out against what I was just talking about like trans people losing their driver's licenses. She was one of the first ones that spoke out about it. Her opponent, Ethan Corson, is also a governor candidate. He's a current senator. However, he took money from Core Civic during one of his, Core Civic, like the for-profit, like prison systems that also own a lot of these ICE detention centers. He took money from them during one of his reelection campaigns, and that's been called out. But he allegedly sent that money to like an organization, but I personally, I don't know. I honestly don't know how to feel about it. He's not my choice, but Cindy Holscher definitely is somebody that we all want. She represents the people. And, speaking of representing the people, how can people contribute to your campaign? This is such an excellent pivot. I love this. But how can people contribute to your campaign and uplift the work that you are doing? And also, when is your primary election?
Sure. So one of the great things people can do is that they can follow me on social media on Instagram and TikTok and push back against the haters because a lot of times there's a lot of hateful comments. And if you wanted to leave nice comments instead and share the content, that is really, really helpful. Of course, we accept donations. We are fundraising right now. Early voting starts, well, we're recording this on a Sunday. Early voting starts tomorrow on Monday, on April 27th. So by the time you hear this, you can early vote in Georgia. And which means we are at the portion of the campaign where we are spending all of our money. I just spent $4,000 on a mailer that we just sent out. And we're spending money on text messages and on digital, and we'd really like to pay people to knock on doors, but I'm not sure we're gonna have the money for that. But if you would like to contribute to the campaign, you can go to aaron4ga.com. That's AARON number 4ga.com, and you can make a donation.
Absolutely. And I think I'm actually going to make a personal donation too, because I really want to.
Oh,
I
that's really
believe in, I,
sweet.
I
Thank
believe
you.
in what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you this. I've donated to candidates running like literally at all levels, but I haven't done it this year. And I think I want to make my first campaign donation that's going to go directly to you, because I believe in what you are doing. And I believe in the true like grassroots movement that you are building, because it's not, and I say movement because it's not just you that is running these grassroots campaigns in Georgia. There is so much organizing in Georgia. Oh my gosh.
There
John,
is, and it's really cool to see all these groups that have popped up. Like even in like in the suburbs where I live in Roswell, we have this group called Roswell Women Rising that does incredible work. We have
yes.
there's a moms group up here called Wine Tifa. And then of course seeing younger people organize, we're seeing of course we have the DSA, we have like all these young Democrats groups. I've talked to young Democrats all over Georgia, and it's really awesome to see their enthusiasm and what they're working on. So I totally agree with you. It's really exciting to see all of these grassroots efforts pop up. So
I'm sorry, the wine teeth had just got me. I am sitting here like literally cracking up because I love that. And it's getting so creative.
yeah,
Like this isn't just like your standard name, like, oh, trying to think of the best way to phrase that. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but these are like
yeah,
really creative like names.
there is. It is creative, and
Wine
like
Tifa is the best.
the acronym for Roswell Women Rising is RAR, which is really great.
See this gives me so much this gives me so much inspiration. I'll edit this part out, but um, this gives me so much inspiration, and it gives me so much hope. And again, I want to say thank you from like every ounce of my being for coming on this podcast, for being transparent, for being open about everything. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I know we're at time, but I want to say thank you. Be on the lookout for my campaign contribution to you.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
I
and
appreciate that.
then this episode will be across all the streaming platforms. Again, I'm Zachary. Aaron, thank you so much for being just you. And I look forward to calling you Representative Baker. Um, I think that it is that representative part. It's not just a title. It's literally just you. And again, I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. This is great. It's a great interview. Thanks.
Absolutely.